She was the one who left, and the one who showed up on the day I never expected her to. Man, looking back now, I probably should have seen it all coming. If I'd been paying more attention, if I just stopped for a second to really think, it might have been as clear as two trains barreling down the same track straight at each other. Obvious, right? But maybe I wasn't watching close enough. Or maybe I just didn't want to see it. I guess I could say one of those trains was tucked away in a tunnel, out of sight, but let's be real, the signs were there. If I just looked a little harder, maybe I would have caught them. Instead, I let myself get caught up, wrapped around her finger, and when that other train came storming out of the dark, I got hit full force. Had no clue what was about to happen. Okay, enough with the dramatic metaphors. Let me just get to the point. Back in school, those two were always there. And when I say, those two, I mean Madison Claire and Paige Rowan. They weren't sisters, but you'd think they were. Everyone just called them, the twins. They didn't just dress alike, they were alike. Same style, same tone, even finished each other's sentences. It was like they were sharing a brain half the time. You never saw one without the other. Now don't get me wrong, they weren't snobs or anything. Once they hit their teenage years, they were out there dating like any other girls. The catch: they only went out on double dates. Always. You couldn't just ask one of them out. If you were interested in one, you had to show up with a buddy they approved of for the other. It was like dating one came with a prerequisite. I'll be honest, I thought they were both good looking. But I never bothered getting too close. That whole double date requirement seemed like way too much hassle. Guys would spend weeks just trying to line up someone they could bring along, someone the girls might find decent enough to make the cut. And from everything I heard, those girls had sky-high standards. I wouldn't be surprised if it was all a game to them, some kind of test guys had to pass just to get a shot. Not that it really mattered for me. Around the time I turned 16, my dad worked some deal with my Uncle Dave, got me set up with a construction apprenticeship. That was just like my old man, "You get a trade, son, and you'll never go hungry." His favorite line. Only downside? The gig was in Chicago and I had to move in with Uncle Dave and Aunt Linda out in the suburbs. So there I was, teenage kid shipped off to the big city, chasing that whole bright lights, big future dream. We lived on the outskirts and most of the construction jobs we did were out there too. I had one full day and one evening class each week at a trade school nearby, but that was it. Uncle Dave was one of those guys who thought if he was paying you, he owned every drop of sweat you had. So by the time I dragged myself through the door at night, I was completely wiped. Going into the city for fun? Not a chance. Oh, and just to clear something up, Uncle Dave didn't just work hard. No, he was under the impression that the harder he worked, the more everyone else should too. He ran on overdrive, sunup to sundown, and expected the rest of us to do the same. I used to joke that my Uncle Dave was the original workaholic, but truth is I was becoming one too. Every weekend he had something lined up. You'd miss a weekday for class? Make it up on Saturday, he'd say without blinking. So those weekend visits back home I'd promised myself? They fizzled out fast. Before I knew it, they were barely even happening. That first year I only made it home 3 times. And the second year? Just once, Christmas. By the third year, things had changed so much I hardly recognized the place. My own dog growled at me like I was a stranger when I walked in. And my old room? It had been taken over by some guy renting it out, some lodger I'd never met. I had to bunk with my kid brother, who'd grown a whole foot since I'd last seen him. Once that apprenticeship wrapped up, I decided enough was enough. I'd had it with working for Uncle Dave. And to be honest, I don't think he was too thrilled when I told him I was leaving. But I didn't care. The man had squeezed every bit of labor he could out of me. I'd put in the hours, worked through sweat and grit, and saved up a decent chunk of change from my meager apprentice wages. So, I packed my bags and headed back home. Not to my parents' place, no way, but I rented a small apartment in town. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Felt good to have a space that was just mine again. Work came quickly too. I had my certifications and it didn't take long to get hired on with one of the local contractors. The jobs were tough, but compared to what Uncle Dave was paying me, the paychecks felt like winning the lottery. Thing is, there weren't many young builders around who really knew what they were doing back then. Guys who could handle themselves on a job site were valuable. So pretty soon I was on a crew working this huge site, 50 new houses going up row after row. When that project wrapped, I landed a spot with a smaller outfit doing a barn conversion. Whole different vibe. Just 6 of us and the owner was there nearly every day hands-on. One day the boss and I were sitting down, going over the blueprints while sipping tea out of paper cups. I casually pointed out that the way the architect laid things out left this big, awkward blank space that didn't make much sense. Turns out the owner and the architect agreed, it was a miss. They added my suggestion to the final plans right before we handed the keys over to the new owners. That same day the architect came up to me, clapped a hand on my shoulder and said, "Kid, you're in the wrong line of work. You should be designing houses, not just building them. You've got an eye for this." It stuck with me. A couple weeks later, I signed up for a part-time course at the local college to study architectural design. I still worked on job sites during the day to cover tuition and rent, but something had shifted. I was moving toward something bigger, something that felt like a future I'd chosen, not just stumbled into. I'll never forget the evening I rolled up in my beat-up old van to one of those upscale houses. Had the ladder still strapped to the roof, tools rattling in the back. Inside the van with me was Dia. Yeah, that diameter. We sat there for a long while just talking. Reminiscing about school, catching up on lost time. Eventually, I took a breath and asked her if she wanted to go out with me the next night. I thought she'd be surprised, maybe even hesitant. And maybe she was. Her answer kind of lingers with me even now. "That'd be nice, Roger," she said with this small, almost sad smile. I haven't been out since Tish left. Looking back, I should have caught the meaning behind that. Should have picked up on something in her tone. But I didn't, not then. I pulled up outside her place around 7:30 that Friday evening. Her dad was the one who answered the door. Sturdy guy, quiet type, gave me that classic once-over, the kind of look fathers give when their daughter's dating someone new. Polite but definitely sizing me up. From that point on, things with Madison, yeah, I should mention by now the Mercedes in this story is Madison, really started to take off. By the end of that month we were officially a thing. Whenever we weren't working or at college we were together. It didn't matter what day it was. If I had night classes, she'd be waiting outside by my van when I got out. And on the days I was in for a full schedule, she'd swing by and meet me for lunch. It felt easy. Effortless. Truthfully, I was head over heels. And from the way she acted, the way she talked about us, I believed she felt the same way. We were all in. After about 3 months of dating, Madison spent the night with me for the first time. It wasn't some big dramatic moment, it just felt natural, like the next step in something that was already real. Now, I should probably pause here and mention something. I'd grown up around a lot of folks from all over, especially since our town got a fair share of American exchange students. My first real girlfriend in high school was actually from Chicago. Sweet girl. But like with any place, there are always a few bad apples that make the rest look bad. And George Greenlake. Well, he was definitely one of those. George had flown in from the States to visit his girlfriend, Portia. Yeah, that was her name, and he stayed with her folks while he was in town. From what I heard, back in the US, Portia and George were practically living together. But here? Not a chance her parents were gonna let them share a bed under their roof. Especially not under the same roof as her very traditional, very strict father. George and Portia had only been in the country a couple of days when everything sort of hit the fan. George tried driving her family's car and, no surprise, ended up heading down the wrong side of the road. Classic mix-up for Americans visiting the UK, but this one caused a scene. The bus driver barely managed to stop in time before George rammed into him. Thankfully, damage was minimal, but it was enough of a mess. Turns out George didn't have international driving credentials. No insurance, no valid license. Just a plain old American one, which somehow the police were fine with once Portia's dad showed up to smooth things over. I didn't stick around to watch it all play out. I drove Dia. Sorry, should have clarified, Dia is Madison's best friend, home while the rest of it unfolded. I never really found out what happened to George after that. Thing is, wherever Madison went, Dia wasn't far behind. She even came by my flat now and then, even though she never stayed long. I guess she just felt more at ease around Madison than anyone else. By the time the holidays rolled around, wedding plans were already in motion. Madison and I were engaged, and her mom, along with her friend Estelle, had practically taken over the entire thing. Madison and I weren't doing much more than nodding and agreeing to whatever they suggested. I mean, I wasn't paying for it, her dad was covering the whole thing. I'd just look at him and ask, "You good with this, Frank?" He'd chuckle and say, "Wait till it's your turn, son. Then you'll see." Funny thing was, no one ever called to cancel. No last-minute changes, no red flags that stuck out. Everything was just moving forward. At least that's how it seemed. To say I was upset would be putting it lightly. I was fuming. Something wasn't sitting right, so I decided to go looking for Madison's car. Wasn't hard to find. Our town's not that big and people tend to stick to the same places. Sure enough, I spotted it parked behind one of the pubs out near the edge of town. The kind of place that's just far enough out that most folks don't ask questions. I walked in and there they were, Madison and Dia tucked into a booth with some guy I'd never seen before. They were so caught up in whatever nonsense he was spinning for Dia, they didn't even clock me walking in. I grabbed a drink, took a seat at the bar on the opposite side of the room and watched for a while. No one noticed. No one cared. Eventually I finished my beer and got up to leave. Madison ducked back inside just long enough to whisper something to Dia, and then the two of them left with that guy in tow. And there it was, that train again. Screaming out of the tunnel, whistle blowing loud and clear, but this time I wasn't surprised. I'd seen it coming. I just didn't want to admit it. The next evening rolled around. Normally I'd have picked Madison up at 8:30 sharp. We had plans to catch a movie. But I didn't go. I stayed home. About 20 minutes later, she let herself into my flat. She barely shut the door behind her before snapping, "What's going on with you? Why didn't you come get me? We had plans." "Oh, right. Must have slipped my mind," I said, flat as day-old coffee. Truth was, my patience was running thin. My home life had already taken a hit. My dad, he used to be one of my favorite people. Kind, reliable, kind of a quiet hero in my life. But after he'd let some random guy rent my old bedroom without even telling me, it felt like he'd turned his back on me. It fractured something in our relationship, and I hadn't been able to put it back together since. Later that same night, way past midnight, Madison's car pulled into the parking lot. I watched from the window, lights off. She got out and sure enough, Dia and that same guy followed behind. Madison walked toward my flat while the other two waited by her car. I stood there in the dark, watching the lights come on, then off, then on again, like she was looking for something. Maybe me, maybe answers, who knows. After that, I didn't say much. I spent the next day crashing at the site where I'd been helping out with a last-minute project. Slept there too. Not because I had to, but because I couldn't stomach being at home. The next morning was college, and even though I was drowning in emotion, I couldn't afford to miss class. Not now. The building work was steady, the money was coming in, but I still had my sights set on becoming an architect. And thank God for that old second-hand car Madison didn't know about. That thing saved me more than once. I saw the girls on campus a couple times that day. They didn't see me, or if they did, they sure didn't act like it. I stayed out of sight. I didn't have it in me to talk, let alone confront anything. Funny thing is, some of the surprises I'd been working on for Madison, wedding surprises, things she had no clue I was planning, had already been in motion. And the folks involved? They understood. Surprisingly, they didn't push back when I explained why things had changed. Maybe they saw what I hadn't. Honestly, I never really thought I was Mr. Rowan's idea of the perfect son-in-law. Frank, Madison's dad, was polite, sure, but I always got the sense he had someone else in mind for his daughter. Still, in some strange way, they seemed to believe that Madison being with me might pull her away from Dia and all the history they shared. Turns out that didn't happen. When we split, it wasn't loud or dramatic. Just sad. Quiet. Her parents wished me well, shook my hand, and that was it. I later heard they never told Madison they even knew about the little place I'd rented or how often she'd been there. They just kept that to themselves. After that, I didn't see much of Madison or Dia at all. They were gone from my life like they'd never been there. Estelle, though, she started showing up now and then, dropping by the house with some excuse or another. I think she was making it clear she was interested, maybe hoping she could fill that space Madison had left behind. And if I'm being honest, I did care about Estelle. She had a kind heart and she'd been there for me during a pretty dark time. But not like that, not in the way she wanted. I had to tell her straight, it wasn't going to happen. The truth was, I was scared of falling for someone while I was still walking through the same town where I'd keep bumping into Madison. It felt like a trap I couldn't risk stepping into. Life moved forward in its messy, uneven way. When Shirley passed, my wife at the time, it was our daughters who held me together. That cold January morning at the funeral, it was them who took the reins. They were just 6 and 7, but you'd have thought they were grown women, the way they greeted everyone, invited folks back to the house for the wake. Shirley had raised them well. Prepared them for that moment long before I ever thought it would come. While I wandered through that day barely holding it together, those two little girls made sure everything else didn't fall apart. My company had done a lot of work for Shirley's family over the years, and when I brought the girls to meet them afterward, it felt right. Like connecting them with people who could become something like grandparents to them. Estelle was still in the picture too, always showing up. So often, in fact, the neighbors started whispering. Thought something was going on between us. That is, until Russell, her boyfriend, started coming around. That put the gossip to rest real quick. Then came the wedding. Not mine. A friend's. I was just another guest, trying to stay low-key. I remember trying not to look around too much, not wanting to catch anyone's eye, but you know how it is. You always sneak a glance. And when I did, there they were, Portia and George. Late, of course, sliding into the back row like they hadn't made a scene years ago. And just when I thought that was awkward enough, Estelle, who was wearing a radio mic for the ceremony, let out a little jab, something like, "Well, this should be interesting." She must have forgotten the mic was on because everyone in the place heard it. Loud and clear. And honestly, I don't blame her. Some people just never learn when it's time to make an exit. There was a strange peace that came over me then. Not because of them, but because I realized I was past it. Whatever Madison and I had, whatever heartbreak came after, it wasn't the end. I had two girls who looked at me like I hung the moon. And even though life hadn't gone the way I pictured it back when I first fell for her, it had gone on. And somehow it was still worth showing up for. I think Madison managed to smile in one of the photos, but she sure didn't look like the happiest girl in the world. Not by a long shot. Once the photographer had gotten through the usual poses, I started guiding folks toward the limos waiting to take everyone to the reception. Right before they left, my girls ran up and threw their arms around me. They wanted hugs, a little reassurance, and I made sure to tell each of them how proud I was. How smart and beautiful they looked. They soaked it in, grinning as they climbed into their car. That's when I noticed, they weren't holding their bouquets anymore. Just like that, those little details were fading away. Somewhere in the shuffle, Madison had slipped back into the crowd. At the reception, she chose to sit with a group of women she'd been beside during the service, nowhere near the family table where her parents and I were seated. That little distance said a lot, even without words. Later on, Estelle came over and asked me to dance. I figured it was a good chance to finally ask what was going on with Madison. "What's the story?" I said, quiet enough that it could have been missed in the noise. "Not now, Roger," she said quickly. "Meet me in the back reception room in 10 minutes. I'll explain everything there. Someone might overhear us out here." I didn't think anyone was listening, but I wasn't about to argue. Estelle had always had a way of knowing when the timing mattered. After our dance, I watched her disappear into the crowd, and my mind wandered back to everything that had led to this day, how things had changed, how people had changed. Madison too. Apparently, the guy she'd once left everything for? The one who swept her away like some romantic storybook ending? He didn't turn out to be the happy ever after she imagined. Somewhere along the way he dumped her. Just like that. And if that sounds familiar, it should. Same way Portia left her behind all those years ago when she jetted off on her gap year. The way Estelle told it, that was the moment Madison realized how much she'd lost. She'd given up the one person who truly loved her, traded that in to stand by a friend who ended up dropping her the second it wasn't convenient. Estelle lowered her voice when she said it. "She lost you, Roger. That was the price she paid. When Shirley passed, we were all shattered." You know, Estelle's mom used to talk with her often. Turns out, Shirley had even asked her to look out for me and the girls. I hadn't known that. But it explained a lot. Even my daughters, young as they were, knew there was something deeper going on. They saw it. They carried it with more grace than I ever could. "So why was your mother so shocked to see Madison today?" I asked. It was like she didn't think she'd show up. Estelle nodded. "She didn't? A few of the old girls talked her into coming down before your bachelor night. Said she looked better than she had in years. We figured she wouldn't refuse a dance. Once you've got your arms around her, well, maybe that'll be enough to get her to sit back down at the family table. And if she's there, maybe she won't walk away again." I stared at her. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Estelle hesitated, looked at me and said, "Honestly, Roger, I don't know. But Madison needs to understand, we don't hold a grudge. And maybe, just maybe, neither do you." I really thought things were behind me. But that morning the house had a strange energy, more charged than I'd felt in a long time. The girls were hyped up beyond belief, buzzing with excitement, and let's just say I didn't exactly spring out of bed. Truth is, they were up and raring to go long before I even opened an eye. It was one of those perfect blue sky mornings, sunlight pouring through the curtains, warm breeze sneaking in through the window. And the girls? They were relentless, practically dragging me out of bed so they could get into the pool. But bless him, they wouldn't step a toe into the backyard unless an adult was present. That was Shirley's doing. She drilled it into them early on and it stuck. Just before lunch, as the house buzzed with the sounds of summer, I came across her letter again. Shirley's letter. "Roger, forgive me if this doesn't come out right. I feel guilty, not just for leaving you the way I did, but for marrying you at all, knowing I brought a lifetime of baggage into your world. We'd only been together a couple of weeks when the doctor gave me the news. I wrestled with whether or not to tell you. I was scared you'd stay out of duty. And you were always that kind of man. But I need you to know, I loved you. And I know you loved me. You don't have any grandchildren yet, but Frank and Kathy have promised to love our girls like their own. Please let them. Kathy's been a friend to me through the long, silent nights. And if it all works out the way I hope, Catherine and Frank will be their real grandparents in every way that matters. Thank you, Roger. Thank you for loving me, for loving us. And just know, if I can, I'll be watching over you. Always. Reading it again still cut deep. That letter, that was the hardest thing she ever gave me. And it broke me in ways I didn't even know I could break. I had to force myself to be angry with her just to survive the grief. I had to convince myself to hate her sometimes just to move forward. But now, I'm not sure I can keep those walls up anymore. Are you going to try? Someone had asked me. Of course I am, I'd said. It was Shirley's last request, that I try. That I don't harden completely. I can't forget that. But I'm going to have to take it slow. I'll need to see if Madison fits into this new life. If the girls take to her, she can take to them. Only then will I even think about letting anything real happen. That afternoon, folks started showing up. Friends from work, some neighbors, kids splashing in the pool. It had the feel of one of those old-school backyard parties Shirley used to plan. Simple, loud, filled with life. Catherine and Frank arrived around 1:30, and they brought Madison with them. She was quiet, unsure, almost like a kid being led into a classroom on her first day. I don't think she expected to see me out there, flipping burgers and pouring drinks. When she did, her eyes dropped for a moment, some mix of shame and nerves. But she didn't stay frozen long. Soon enough, she was in the pool, splashing around with Estelle and the kids like it was the most natural thing in the world. I recognized the swimsuit. It used to belong to Estelle. She must have loaned it to Madison. Kind of fitting, really, how old ties sometimes find their way back, not through dramatic moments but in small, almost forgettable ways. A borrowed swimsuit. A glance across the patio. A slow, cautious re-entry. I spent most of that day just moving around, talking with folks, soaking in conversations, half listening, half somewhere else. Russell stuck by my side through a good bit of it, and between the two of us I think we heard the entire life stories of everyone at the party. It was nice. Familiar. But after a while I found myself in the kitchen, pretending to fuss with something just for the sake of a few quiet minutes. I needed to think. About what the girls had said. About what I hadn't let myself think about in a long time. Then came that voice, quiet but insistent, the one that usually only shows up when you're staring at yourself too long in the mirror. Bogger, don't talk rubbish. You bleeding idiot. You've been floating since Shirley passed. You've got to start thinking about what comes next. It was right. I'd been drifting. But today, something had changed. I kept thinking about the way the girls looked at Madison, like they knew her even though they didn't. Like she'd always been meant to be there. I remembered that same look on their faces at Estelle's wedding. The real question wasn't whether they liked her. It was, did I? I hadn't let myself ask that in a long time. That's when Catherine walked over to me. She smiled, but it wasn't just a casual smile. It was that knowing kind mothers give when they're already a few moves ahead. Mercedes, Madison, and Estelle are in the kitchen doing some of the washing up, she said. If you're going to have that talk, now's the time. Estelle, make herself scarce, don't worry. I blinked. You and my girls trying to marry me off, or what? Catherine grinned. None of us has said a word to Madison. But between me and your girls, yeah, we've got hopes. I smiled. Couldn't help it. When I stepped into the kitchen, Madison was there, sleeves rolled up, hands in the sink, sleeves wet up to the elbows. She looked back at me, startled at first, then softened. Estelle gave me a little nod and slipped out without a word. For a while we didn't say anything. Just the sound of dishes clinking and water running. And then, quietly, Madison said, I threw away the chance to spend the rest of my life with you. How could I have been that stupid? I didn't jump in right away. I didn't have to. I just watched her for a second. She looked older, yes. Wiser, definitely. But that girl I fell for, she was still in there. Somewhere. Maybe you weren't stupid, I said finally. Shirley believed in fate. I never really did. But she always said the Lord moves in mysterious ways. Madison gave a half laugh, eyes still on the sink. Maybe, I added, if there is someone up there, he had something for Shirley to do before we ever got married. And now, maybe there's something I'm meant to do. What's that? She asked. I looked up toward the stairs. There's 2 little girls upstairs who are missing a mother. And for some reason they seem to think you'd be pretty good at filling that space. There was silence after that, but not the uncomfortable kind. Just peace. And a quiet kind of understanding that doesn't need words to fill the space. A couple weeks later, Madison and I went away for a bit. Just the 2 of us. No pressure. No promises. Just space to breathe. And 10 minutes after we came home, I was standing in front of that same altar again. Only this time I knew exactly what I was saying yes to. I traded spots with Russell near the front, felt like the right thing to do. I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting the full family turnout. Every single one of them there and accounted for. I've got no doubt Catherine had something to do with that. That woman can be persuasive when she wants to be. Get her on a mission and nothing stands in her way. But what really caught me off guard? 8 of the guys from my crew showed up. Not just suited and booted either, they came in style. See, my old work van, yeah that van, was parked just off to the side. Only it wasn't the battered old rust bucket I remembered. It looked brand new. Bright paint job, ribbons tied to the ladders up top, the works. And sitting behind the wheel? A uniformed chauffeur, all proper and polished. The boys fixed her up, Russell said, clapping a hand on my back. We figured, it started with that van. Might as well end with it too. When they slid open the side door, I nearly laughed out loud. They gutted the back and replaced everything with a love seat, soft cushions, cozy throw blanket. It's a convertible, boss, one of the lads whispered, grinning. Get impatient, just pull the lever under the arm and, bam, you got yourself a bed. Madison and I climbed in, surrounded by grins and quiet cheers. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a kind of peace I'd stopped hoping for. Later on, I caught a brief moment with Tish, who, in true Tish fashion, managed to hit me with something unexpected. I might be free for lunch that day, she said with a smirk. What day? I asked amused. 2026, she said, dead serious. That's 20 years from now. You must be joking. Nope, she replied, totally straight-faced. All 3 of my kids should be out of the house by then, so I figure I can finally sit down with you. 3 kids. I blinked. I thought I only had 2. Well, she said, lowering her voice with a playful smile, Roger and I do have 2, currently. But there's a chance it could end up being 2, in 2 bits. I stared at her, confused. She winked. Twins run in my family, you know. And just like that she turned and walked off. Goodbye, Tish, I called after her. Give me a call, in about 20 years. So here I am. Years down the road from the day it all came crashing down. And somehow, against all odds, life found a way to build something new from the pieces. Not perfect, but whole. And for the first time in a long time, I think that's enough.